Hello, welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be looking at the importance of serratus anterior for the shoulder function. I have discussed this exercise numerous times, and I tend to place a lot of emphasis more so on the serratus than the lower trapezius and upper trapezius, who are also playing role in functions of the scapula, and I wanted to explain why in this video. Even though the others, especially lower trapezius, play an important role as well, I tend to find that the serratus is a bigger factor to overcome, and if you do overcome it, you usually get out of your problem with your shoulder or your neck pain for that matter. This exercise here, being the wall slides, is a good example of how the serratus works, and one exercise that I'd use in the beginning with people because it really is moving into the position of where it's most likely to compensate and not work and create all the problems that you're going to encounter. So when people are moving their hands overhead, so they're not even lifting anything here, but just the position, the stability, the alignment of what's going on is important. So that's where you can really work on things to get to the point where you could strengthen it. So right at that point there where he's lifting his arm overhead, the scapula is having to move into this upward rotation, all right, so on both sides, and if it doesn't do that, basically the scapula is moving up and over and into the area of pain, being at the top of the shoulders here, or with the rotator cuff tears, the supraspinatus, or just neck pain. So there's a real dysfunction in overhead movements. So all pushing movements, all overhead movements, often what aggravates neck pain and shoulder pain, and the serratus is actually predominantly required in all of those movements, whereas in the lower trapezius you can effectively strengthen it and position it with pulling exercises, which don't really aggravate things anywhere near to the extent that a pushing movement does, and especially overhead. So if I take that wall slides from being no load, just moving the arms, but then doing it with load in this half kneeling position, which the reason I do it kneeling is it just gets more stability, more control, takes the pelvis out of, so any pelvic things are basically negated by doing it this way. Easy to control the angle of the barbell, and you can see here that it's not actually going directly above. We're still going in this forward motion, but I get this really good ability to try and drive that scapula around and out, as opposed to it just going dysfunctionally over. And even when it comes down at the bottom, so right here is where you can't see in this, but we might see that wing scapula sticking out. So that's probably where the lower trapezius is more of a factor here, where it'd be pulling into the posterior tilt. But to be honest, all three muscles, upper traps, lower traps, and serratus, are all playing a role in this. But the point of this video was to try and show you that it's the pushing action that ultimately resolves everything, and it can almost entirely hinges on the ability of the serratus anterior to perform the role, where the other two muscles they're still involved but not to the same level. Now, I obviously wouldn't start with that exercise. That would be extremely painful and near impossible. The wall slides, absolutely I would. But if in terms of strengthening, before I got to the overhead things, I'd be doing things like push-ups, kneeling push-ups, and protraction, and then obviously the single cable push, because that has a bigger emphasis above all of them. So let's take a quick look at those. Okay, so in terms of the push-up, this would be one of the easiest ways. Now, again, if there's too much pain or weakness present, I may have to start on the knees to begin with, but I can basically get like really good control of the scapula because the arm is so stable, like I can't move. It's a closed chain exercise. So basically I can get more movement around here without compensation because it's so stable, and also being in this horizontal position, that's the most strongest position for the shoulder to be in. Other than when I'm standing, I have not as much control. So I can really get that full protraction right at the top there. So right that bit there, you see that's where the serratus anterior was really pulling it through. All right, so what gives it away is if it's nice and flat. If the scapula is still sticking out, you know that they haven't been able to achieve that. So I can move on from that and adding like the little yoga downward dog, which again brings me into that sort of angle that we saw with the wall slides and the barbell from a minute ago. So I get that little bit of extra rotation that I have to provide to get that arm into this overhead position. Now again, because it's a closed chain exercise, I get more stability, I get more control. So that's why it's good in the beginning before you move to the open chain exercises with dumbbells and cables even, all right, because they're a lot harder to control. So it's a great one to use in the beginning to get that person to understand that mechanics of the scapula and what the serratus does. And again, you can see why it's so much of a problem in the beginning with shoulder problems, because those movements are usually the most painful, especially rotator cuff tears, shoulder impingements, things like that. So they're very difficult to do. With the pulling things, you don't get any of those problems because the arm's in a much better position to be able to handle the movements and the load. All right. So following on from that would be my cable pushes, but in this example I'm showing a 2-arm push, but really I'd get more benefit with the Serratus Anterior with a single arm push than a dual arm, even though the push-up was doing that. And the reason is that you'll start to get a greater protraction of the scapula. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so if I want to get greater protraction and get more use out of the Serratus Anterior, the single arm is going to do a better job for me. Now, I don't necessarily need to add the weight shift like I do in this, but it just really highlights exactly what I mean by this full protraction when you won't get the 2 arms. All right, so you'll see right at that point there, that's where I've got that full scapular upward rotation come right around. So this is why Serratus Anterior is called the boxer's muscle, because it's very pronounced in boxers. And you can see how the scapula will be dead flat on the thorax here, and I'm building tremendous amount of strength from this end range. It's this end range that does everything, just like we saw on the push-up before. So I get really, really good work into this muscle from doing that. And from that 2-arm one, I don't get that extra range, I don't get that added benefit. When I add this little extra rotation to it, it just provides that extra bit of strength for it to maintain it so the elbow doesn't buckle and bend back towards the machine. And I can really push it away. It's really exaggerating its work, which is so good for the shoulder. So you can see right there, there was a good example how it's pushing right out away. So this scapula is moving right out, and if I've got a good posture, I've got the posterior tilt at the same time. A great way to get rid of winging scapulas and build that tremendous strength into that Serratus Anterior. But like I said, this wouldn't be an exercise I'd start with. I'd have to start with simpler ones first, all the closed chain things, and then gradually build up as you improve. You know, and it's such an awesome exercise, such a very important muscle to work on. But like I said many times, it's just very difficult because the exercises that need it to develop its pure strength are also the same ones that are a problem. All right, so I'll do a second video discussing a bit more about the other reasons why it's a problem and what affects these movements, but this was just more about understanding its mechanics and why it's so important to the health of the scapula, which is vital to the health of the shoulder and also the neck, because a lot of the neck problems will originate from the weakness of this muscle. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed that video, and we'll see you in the next one.